the lessons of history and the responsibilities of individuals and societies in the face of justice. Her message, Never Again is Now, urges us to consider whether the warnings of the past are being ignored today. Vera, I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's important right now that people hear some things that they don't hear from others.
Yes, it is. It is. I want to start off with you briefly introducing yourself because people may be unfamiliar with your story and who you are. So if you could just let us know a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your experience surviving the Holocaust.
Well, I was a small child. I was 3.5 when my parents and I were evicted from our home and deported to a concentration camp in Ukraine. Uh, it was not a death camp, and most camps were not death camps. There were only some. But being in any concentration camp meant that you were en route eventually to the death camp. That was the plan. And so fear was always part of the existence. Fear, just fear of being put on a list, fear of being taken for slave labor. I mean, there were a lot of, it was an existence of fear and starvation. Uh, People may not have a concept really of what that really means. So for me, I was in the camp for 3 years, from age 3.5 to 6.5. And during that time, I didn't grow. I left the camp in exactly the same coat. I didn't have any other, but the same coat that I came in. Uh, that's that should give people an idea of what this really means, not just those who were skeletons, but those of us who were nevertheless starved, and our bodies were starved, and so were our minds. Uh, I was, when my father died, really rather quickly, within 6 months to 3/4 of a year, something like that. He died of typhus, which was rampant in all camps, all ghettos, because of the lack of sanitation, because of starvation, because of cold. Um, it was rampant, but he died and I didn't, and my mother didn't. Um, but I didn't have a childhood. Okay. I don't know how people can imagine what that's like. And that's something that doesn't go away uh, throughout one's life. One is supposed to have a certain childhood to grow into adulthood. I didn't have that. I had an odyssey. I was rescued from the camp after 3 years in 1944 when the plan was to exterminate everyone who was left who had not yet been exterminated. That was really the period. That was the height of the final solution. And a deal was made with Romania. I was born in Romania. Probably money changed hands. This kind of thing always goes on uh, in wartime, but not only in wartime, as we know. Uh, and some organizations paid, and the ruse was that Romania said, "Oh, they made a mistake. They should have never sent the children to camps." So that was, but that meant now a separation from my mother. Uh, and I did not see my mother then for 4 years. So 3 years in a camp and 4 years without a mother. Uh, any decent psychiatrist would tell you that that's a big trauma. That's a big trauma to carry in your lifetime. Now, that does not mean that I, all my life, focused on the Holocaust in my experience. And no, I didn't. I lived. I married a man I really loved who adored me, and we had two children. Uh, but life has its unexpected and unplanned uh, bad things and good things that happen to you. And it's not according to what you deserve or what you planned or none of that. None of that really matters. Those are things beyond our uh, control. Uh, but my son, my firstborn son, developed a mental illness. And that's when I first I had to grapple with the mental health system in New York. That whole horrible saga gave me insight into bad, really bad medicine, bad mental health, bad public health. The whole system is rotten, rotten to the core. Uh, and I learned a great deal during that time because I saw what was happening. A lot of money was being spent by taxpayers, but it wasn't really to help those who it was supposed to be. It was a lot of different providers who essentially captured the disabled their entitlement, but didn't necessarily give them the services for which they were being paid.
Mm.
It's total phony. I also learned the uh, absurdity of what is called controlled clinical trials, the gold standard of uh, experimental medicine, right? Well, what does it mean, control? When I first heard the term, I said, well, yes, whoever pays for the trial controls it. And I got a whole lecture. Oh, no, no, Vera, you don't understand. And they told me all about well, here it is about 30 years later, and I was right. There is no real science going on at all. It's all according to who pays for it.
Mhm.
The outcome is predetermined. Okay? That's how it works. Uh, and this went for quite a few years that I worked on in this whole area of psychiatry and mental health. In the end, actually, tragically, really tragically, my son died of the medication that was prescribed to him. It was a new medication, and it was the wonder drug, it was going to cure, and all this kind of thing. Well, he died of essentially organ failure. That's what it does. They give it a label, um, neuroleptic malignant syndrome. It has nothing to do with malignancy, but it has everything to do with psychiatric drugs that destroy your organs, your body. And New York State tried to change the coroner's indication of the cause of death. He determined it was Clozaril, that's the drug.
Okay.
And they tried to coerce him. Well, luckily he was a senior and was soon going to retire, so he didn't cave. But I remembered it. It was a very important indication how government controls. Um, Now, actually, I talk about never again is now global. Never again is what is the mem that was adopted by Jews and others actually about the Holocaust. But no, this is not just about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is part of a whole series of holocausts.
Mhm.
And it is not unique. What I have been saying, even before COVID, is what was unique about the Holocaust was the reliance on, the dependence on the medical profession to get it done. Without the medical profession, they could not have carried out the mass murders that they did. There were always doctors in white coats who made the selections who shall die and who will be a slave laborer, who will be experimented on and who will do work. This was doctors. Doctors set the protocol, and it began not with Jews. It began with German disabled babies and children, young children, okay? They were the first to be exterminated medically in hospitals. Let's just get this really, really straight. And then in the camps, uh, Jews were not the only ones that they experimented on, whether it was Mengele or the others. No, it was others as well. Yes, the propaganda and all that was about Jews, but Jews were not the only victims of the Nazi period. Okay, and to pretend that that's so and to insist that that's so is absolutely a lie. The Holocaust prepared the ground for COVID. The medical profession is responsible for the deaths of millions of people who should never have taken those shots, which the doctors did not even know what the ingredients were. What kind of a doctor injects stuff? That's all they knew. It was
Mhm.
blank. They didn't know what was in it. They
That's
didn't know
right.
what it was, how it was designed, nothing. And they insisted on injecting it on everyone, including babies.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
that's mass murder. That's global.
Yes. Absolutely. And
Uh,
it's Bill Gates had mentioned in a video that if we wanted to know what the long-term side effects of the vaccines would be, then we would have to wait two
yes,
years. So a
because
wait and see approach. And we knew that the safety trials were expedited and it didn't go through proper safety testing whatsoever. It was just a mass human experiment. And it was just like playing Russian roulette. Let's do this on a massive global scale, and we'll wait and see a couple of years what transpires from this.
yeah, well, now we see what transpired. Turbo cancer, which never existed. Turbo cancer and every organ. Uh, More and more is coming out in documents. Among them, of course, that there were different batches that targeted different organs of the body. This was probably the most massive uh, medical crime in history, but it was prepared one after the other. You know, each time people were scared of this virus and that virus and the other virus. Hey, it's not the virus you have to be scared of. It's what they give you as if uh, to cure. Well, they never even said that this would cure. This is an experimental bioweapon, and they tested out variants of it. Each each batch designed differently. Uh, Now, if people think that I'm just making this up, they need to listen to some of the doctors involved, the scientists involved, whether it's Dr. Michael Yeadon, Dr. Sukarit Bhakti. These are, renowned world-class scientists. More and more is coming out now. And I have to say that the people who were skeptical and who are skeptical are the working class, not your university um, indoctrinated people who believe in following authority. That's the killer. If you don't use your own judgment about what you should put in your body and defer to authority, you're a slave. You're nothing more than a sheep, because like God gave us choice, freedom of choice. He told us that we were made in God's image. That's what that meant. That means we can make decisions. We don't have to listen to others. And then, of course, the one the one positive outcome that came out of the Nazi period, the Holocaust, is the Nuremberg Code. The Nuremberg Code is a universal international legal code. It is as binding as the Ten Commandments. Okay, you cannot change a word.
Mhm.
It was part of a military tribunal's decision, an American military tribunal at the doctor's trial, which, of course, there were only just a few doctors, 23, but they never really put on trial, even half of the perpetrators or a quarter of them. There were many, the entire medical establishment was involved. And many of them then were brought to the United States. Brought to the United States to train the doctors here on how to do it the Nazi way. And that's what we've had. That's why I call it Never Again is now global, because with COVID, we saw this was all over the world. They were pushing the lockdowns, the surveillance, the masking, and the bioweapons. And these bioweapons are under military control. Let's understand that. Since when is the military in the business of saving lives? The military is in the business of annihilating lives. Come on, who the heck? And how much can you believe of absurd arguments?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think that any war in history has gone in and fully liberated and saved lives. It's caused destruction, poverty, and death, right? One only has to look back onto history. You mentioned that you believe that the Holocaust started with doctors and, the polarities of COVID. And you will say that you believe that the vaccines and that was part of a genocide globally.
Mhm.
Okay. So, what else do you think was a contribution to how the Holocaust was able to start? I know I saw part of your speech at the event for the 75th annual event for the Nuremberg Code. And you said that the Holocaust was preceded by 9 years of the basically dismantling and suspension of civil rights, human rights, and legal rights. But you also said that fear and
Mhm.
hatred was a big contributing factor. What are you seeing right now in the world um, that is happening that is similar to how um, the Holocaust started?
Well, there since World War II, there was this demonization, a polarity. So first it was the Red Scare, and that was uh, the fear of the Soviet Union dropping atom bombs. They didn't have atom bombs. It was a lie.
Mm.
But I, as a school child in New York, had to go under my desk in school, go like this cover, and the absurdity of having children do this in fear of atom bombs. Now, what possible gain do you get by getting down under your desk?
Mm.
But this is just it. When you inculcate irrational fear in people, in other words, that they stop thinking for themselves, you've won. You can do anything with them.
Mm.
And that's what they did with COVID. An invisible, never before done. Oh, it's from nature. Anyway, every part of it was a lie. The tests were totally a lie. Uh, it was it's not just rigged. I mean, it was very carefully planned and executed.
Mm.
Uh, my experience came in very handy, I must say. In April 2020, right away, when we were, and I live in New York City, we were the epicenter of the number of casualties. And we were told the hospitals are overwhelmed. You've got to stay home. You've got to stay away from people. There were a couple of women, I don't know who they are or what, but they went with their iPhones to all the hospitals in New York. And except for three, where everyone was sent, they were all empty, absolutely empty, because nothing else was being done in hospitals at all. All other medical uh, care was suspended. And since they were not among the three that everyone was sent to, everyone who was suspected of having COVID, wasn't any evidence. But the point was, I said, wait a minute, we are being told you've got to stay home because they can't take care of you, you're going to die. It's the exact opposite. It's nonsense. So
Mhm.
I recognize that. And uh, others should have recognized it. I mean, this doesn't take a genius to figure out. But if you give in to authority and you suspend your own judgment about a situation in your life, and you're just told to defer to authority, the authority being Anthony Fauci. Uh, I'm sorry. This is, I mean, I hope and I do believe that more people have learned. I don't think they can get away with it again. But the issue really, and this is something that Goering, a Nazi propaganda guy, said very clearly. The most important thing is to keep people in fear. In, when people are in fear, they cannot think rationally. They're crippled.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So in the beginning of COVID, that's kind of how my journalism started. I was one of those individuals filming inside of the hospitals with my phone. I was then banned. Like there was security postings that don't approach this woman if you see her. And yeah, my findings were that the majority, and I drove across Southern Ontario at that time, where was that they were empty. Some, like you said, were not. And I believe that was by design to create confusion so that those that everyone was sent to, seemed really full and impacted and overwhelmed. And so those staff or nurses that were working within those specific hospitals were seeing something different than what the majority was seeing. So, I'd get someone tell me, come to my hospital is completely empty. I need you to film it. This is not true. And then someone else saying, my hospital's flooded and overwhelmed. And then I started to realize that there was actually designated COVID hospitals.
Right. Exactly.
So
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
yeah. So again, all by design and all to create this fear. I want to get back to the dehumanizing portion of that because I I mean we were victims to that if we had chose to not get vaccinated. There was an absolute smear campaign against those of us, and that they actually said this is a war of the unvaccinated.
Yeah, they made that up.
And
These kind of slick memes, you have to really always be suspicious of them. Who makes them up and why?
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And it was a truly horrible time. And I'm grateful that you said that there's hope. But what I find, and this is just common in society, is human beings tend to forget so quickly. It's like we've all kind of just moved on. I know there's still others that are working hard, on the legal side of things to try and expose this. But, it seems like, Fauci, Gates, the WHO, public health, they're all just kind of getting away with it, and we're all just moving on with our lives.
Um, okay, you're right and you're wrong.
Okay. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's how it is. No, you're right that people would like to forget. You're absolutely right that people were not punished, but that is exactly the case. That's the case. It was with Nazi Germany. They had some Nuremberg trials, but these did not touch those who financed and were partners. It's like blind partners. And these were the corporations in the United States, in the UK, in Germany, in Switzerland. I mean, of course, the bankers, but there were more. I talk about the IBM and all that, but there were most of the major corporations, which are now multinationals. Okay, so multinational, global. They were part of the Nazi thing. Without them, Hitler could never have done anything. He didn't have anything. It's just like the Palestinians don't have the kind of armamentarium to really threaten Israel. That just doesn't exist. They don't have an air force. They have nothing. Okay, they have machine guns. They have smaller things, but they don't have the kind of things to make Israelis be in a state of fear, just like during COVID. And they've been held in a state of fear for 75 years. They are deluded. And this is what happens when you are in a state of fear, you're deluded. You're willing to swallow anything as long as it's an answer to something. I mean, you've been captured. Your brain and your psyche is captured by this fear. Fear is the worst weapon. You don't need machine guns. Just keep people in fear and give orders, and they'll do whatever you want.
Is that what you believe is happening right now with between Israel and Palestine? You believe that they've been able to create enough fear in people to support this current war?
Yes, they've been talking, we've been talking about terrorists. That was first, yeah, the Israelis called the Palestinians terrorists. Well, one person's terrorist is the other one's defense force. Uh, the fact is that Palestinians have been held in a kind of those who are citizens of Israel. It's apartheid. They don't have equal rights. And most of the Palestinians are not part of Israel. Most of the Palestinians have been held in camps. That's what it is. I certainly regard them as concentration camps. What else? There's no exit. Uh, why are children targeted? Thousands and thousands of children, Palestinian children, who did they harm? There are a lot of excuses. The evidence points the other way. The International Court of Justice declared Israel was committing genocide. They deny it all the time. Oh no, no, it's not genocide, it's self defense. You cannot argue when people who are in have been in camps like this for decades. Children born there, bred there. I mean, nothing normal life, nothing, no normal life whatsoever. Why? What was their sin? What was their sin? There is a history, and I've been studying it, and I had to open my eyes to what I didn't really want to, because you have to understand that after I was rescued from the camp, eventually after 8 months or so of being kind of a child in transit, uh, I went to Palestine, where my mother had a sister there. So, and I should say that one of the things my mother did when I left is she sewed into the seams of my coat the names, and if she had it, the addresses of any and every person that she knew anywhere in the world, because she didn't know where I would land. That was a very intelligent thing to do, because I
Yeah.
had sort of, and that's how I got to my aunt. And I spent 3 years there on a farm. They had a family farm, an organic family farm, because there was no other but organic. Those 3 years were the only happy years in my childhood. So for me then to have to learn the history of what went on there, in particular after I left, because my mother did not join me in Palestine because she knew there would be war and she didn't want to be again in a war zone. So she managed to get to the United States, to New York, and then eventually we were united in January 1948. I left Palestine December 1947. It was the eve of the war.
Wow.
So I'm very much somehow or other, I'm in every major 20th century and 21st century historic period. I have a role in it. And now I really do feel that I have a mission to tell the truth. I don't care who it doesn't, who's those that steps on who's, the truth shall set you free. And at this age, I have nothing to fear. And not only that, I found out, it didn't occur to me really, but few people have pointed it out to me, including a musician. Vera means truth in Latin,
Wow.
veritas. Well, that's it. Nothing will stop me from telling the truth. I don't
There you
care.
go.
I don't care about money. I don't care about being invited to this or invited to that. I will tell the truth, and the people listening to me will decide whether I'm telling the truth or not. And that's all.
Amen. I love that, Vera. And the truth makes people uncomfortable, but it is absolute and it is what will set you free. One thing that I'm finding out there is that there are comparisons being made with this, referring to this current war to the Holocaust, both being a genocide. But I'm also seeing that certain people are getting deeply offended or feeling attacked when that comparison is made. And how does one who was not a part of the Holocaust or who didn't lose people in the Holocaust or is Jewish, how does one denounce the war? And how do we honor the Holocaust memory without diminishing the suffering of others and speaking on behalf of the suffering of others?
Well, that's part of really. my mission. I mean, I've done a documentary, a 5 episode documentary, Never Again is now global, and now a book. It'll be really the first of probably three, is coming out June 30th. Never Again is now global. Uh, the the issue of the Holocaust, and this I have every right to speak strongly my opinion. I mean, I resent the fact that the Holocaust has been used by the Zionist Israelis as their raison d'etre. The history of the Zionists during the Holocaust is nothing to be proud of. That's the evidence. And one of the most important lessons that I have learned in my lifetime, and I learned it actually as I was a little child, experiencing both in the camp and outside of the camp, and during this journey that I took, where I was helped by kind people, among them Romanian Christian family. I learned early that there are good people in the world and there are bad people. And guess what? The truth is that there is no group, no ethnic group, no religious group, no professional group, no community where you don't have some people who are like saints, who are wonderful, right? Who understand that we are one human family. That's my real message. And at my age, I think I have a right to remind people that the real virus that has really attached and attacked humanity is eugenics. Those who think that they are superior to others. That is a virus. It's very, very catching. And it is in every darn group. There are people who think that they are entitled to dictate how you should live your life, what you should put in your body, and you should have no say. That is, I call it, look, by any standard, all things that end in ism, including nationalism, communism, fascism, they're all the same in the sense that they want to control people. They want to declare some people are worthy and some people are Untermenschen. That's what the Germans called them. Übermenschen and Untermenschen. And you have that now. You had it during COVID. How dare anyone dictate? With the Nuremberg Code there, where informed, voluntary, informed consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. There's no ifs and buts. And the medical profession went along with the government to dictate what has turned out to be a bioweapon. Many versions of a bioweapon, which shows you that there was intent. This was not accidental. This was not that they didn't know how it would turn out. Oh, yes, they did. Scientists and pharmaceutical companies do not let out products if they don't know what it'll do. They prepare usually for lawsuits. In this case, the government gave them the PrEP Act, where they are absolved of all harm. Now, if that isn't a perfect way to annihilate as many people as you want, then you're totally with that. This is what you see. Some people get confused about how can you punish, this upper, people who are in such high standing. That's the ones you have to punish because they're the ones who are doing this. This isn't thugs in the street. This isn't the guy in the garage who makes something that explodes and and it's not very good. But hey, he doesn't do what they cook up, and they planned it. There were they planned out exactly how they would do this. They had these tabletop uh, rehearsals It's not by accident that they've closed up all the local businesses during lockdowns. That wasn't an accident. They are pushing everyone to buy from Amazon. Well, what does that mean? No competition. And when there's no competition, guess what happens? The prices are going to go up and the choices of things are going to go down. We will get back to the time as John, as you know, this was Ford. Ford was told, you really we have to make some cars in colors. And he said, what's the problem? They can have any color they want as long as it's black. No choice. When you have a monopoly, no choice. And that's what they're pushing for. So people should understand that while Amazon's very convenient and sometimes the prices are low, this is by design. This is a slow way to get rid of all the competition.
Mhm.
That's not free enterprise. That's very controlled.
100%. There's certain places that I will definitely not support. I've never had an Amazon account. I will not go to Walmart. Basically all those places that were able to remain open while everybody else suffered and was forced to close down. It's those places that I don't think we should support, right? It caused a lot of destruction and a lot of people to lose their livelihoods and their businesses and their jobs. So you're absolutely right. We were forced into these certain places, right?
I want to say one more thing about the COVID formula that was used, and that's the masks. I was particularly upset over the masking of the children. You see, for children to see everyone masked and to be told you've got to keep it on because a stranger could infect them and kill them. I mean, this is how, but that was the message. I was so horrified because I saved my own life by being able to discern strangers that I could trust to take care of me during those 8 months when I was without any supervision. And I must say, I was pretty successful at it. Nobody abused me. How many could say that now? I I read people's faces. I read their eyes. I read their affect. And I decided who I would go with and who I wouldn't. And these children were denied the ability to discern uh, to me, and that crime doesn't go away. Then the little ones, the very little ones, they didn't learn how to pronounce words properly because they didn't see how the lips are supposed to be. Now, I think people ought to think about these kind of crimes. This has, right, this doesn't have to do with bombs and with starvation, but it has to do with nuance. And we human beings need to be able to read each other. That's part of communication.
Wow. I've never looked at it that way. Like I obviously was totally against masking of children, lockdowns, keeping children isolated and separated and all that. But I never looked at it in that way where by having everybody's face covered, children couldn't read, yeah, the facial expressions and in order to really discern and trust, right? So that's interesting. Um, One thing I find now as well, I mean, there's a lot of abuses that are occurring against children. I mean, with trafficking and all this, and there's a lot of things that are happening in our world where, you know, it's almost like we are allowing children to make decisions for themselves or trust certain people and authority, which, is a slippery slope. And I think that they're removing a lot of the parental rights and giving more rights to the state, to institutions. So that kind of, you know, it's like a chipping away of uh, our rights as parents, but also making children trust people they maybe shouldn't be trusting.
Well, unfortunately, uh, if people think they can go back and live normal lives, that's not possible. That's absolutely not possible. Everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we write is being surveyed and accumulated into a database. Everything. The phone, both what you text and what you say, is being put into a pool. And for what purpose? Just as an aside, in 1918, during the so-called, again, the major flu, the 1918 Spanish flu, which wasn't Spanish, it wasn't a flu, it wasn't a flu. They did an experiment in a hospital. Half the staff wore masks and half the staff didn't. And guess what? No difference. So that was a scientific, quote, controlled art. And lo and behold, then when they did it in 2020, what happened to all those experts? They didn't read the study. They didn't have to do anything. It's already been done way back. Didn't change. It's nonsense. But it did its job. It made people suspicious of each other. Nobody, and since then, with the iPhone, I mean, I live in a high rise. So, elevator. Used to be people would say, good morning, the weather is this, some kind of chit chat, some kind of human interaction. There's no such thing now. Everybody is just in their phone.
Very
That was
true.
supposed to bring us together, right? No, it's not. It was meant to keep us apart. It was meant to confuse us. It was meant to make us dependent on it. I would
Abs
like to go back, by the way, I would like to go back, way back, when people communicated, if they were far apart, write a letter, a handwritten letter, lick the envelope, put the stamp on, and it's only between me and the recipient. Nobody else reads it. That would be really, that's what we should be doing. Or have a pigeon, a carrier pigeon take it. But it's between two people. That's it. There's nothing between two people. Nothing.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. My generation was the one that lived without it, and then it was introduced. So I was fortunate to kind of see both
Yes.
sides. And social media is another thing. They say it's social, but it's actually the complete opposite. It's antisocial. I've gone out for dinner with friends, and I'll see young teenagers sitting around us, and they're not even communicating with each other. They're not even looking at each other. They're just glued to their phones. And it's this whole social media thing. It's just like people put out this facade, like these fake lives that they're not even really truly living. It's all just for image and for show. I think there's benefits to it. I think during COVID, we saw that information was able to be shared and people were able to find, their community. I think there are benefits to it, but it is frightening to see what's going on. And the other thing is that people will have these arguments and debates on social media, and it's like they have a sense of courage or bravery, saying things they would never say to somebody face to face, right? It's just you're sitting behind a keyboard. And so it
Yeah.
gives you this dose of, like courage because you're never going to have to confront this person or see this person in real life. And that's a huge problem because I think what we're lacking today in society and humanity is the ability to speak to each other and communicate and truly understand where the other individual is coming from, right? That sense, that compassion and that empathy and understanding is being absolved through this, um, you know,
There, it's essentially people talk in memes and in codes and acronyms. They don't actually pronounce anything. Uh, Vocabulary is all gone, and nuance is all gone. And of course, to me, I mean, and I know was that was what saved my life. I could have gone with the wrong person.
mhm,
I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, they were evil people. I learned how to do that. I don't know, and nobody taught me that. By the way, this was not, after all, I was still a child. I didn't. Nobody taught me, and nobody taught me to be moral. But when I saw certain things that I did see, and we don't have time to go into everything, but I knew what was right and wrong. On the
Yeah,
way out from the camp, I'll just give you an instance, which is when we went, it was, we were supposed to be orphan children, and my mother lied, put me on the list as an orphan. I was only half an orphan, my father, but she was alive. And we were sent out in the cattle cars that had brought people to the various camps. And but the difference was that en route they did let us off once to relieve ourselves. Okay. And one of the children was a bit older than the rest of us. She may have been 18, 19, I don't know, but she was older. And she came back, she had found a baby in the ditch. That's right. And she wanted to keep the baby. And no matter what, they wouldn't let her. They beat her off the train with the baby. And I stood there in horror, watching it. Here I am, 6.5. And I'm thinking, I realized that what she was doing was right. She was trying to save the baby. But I also knew that they would both be dead. I knew that they would be dead. I knew that either they would be shot or they'd die from the cold. It was December or something, very cold there. But I also knew that I couldn't do what she did. I wanted to live. Nobody taught me that. It comes from within. It comes when you do experience the world. So what you're telling about how teenagers and that they're being kept with entertainment and with all of that is meant to take away their connection to what is really the essence of human.
wow, that's difficult. I do want to get back to something you said before, and I think it's important to clarify this because there's a lot of different opinions and things around this. So you said the word Zionism. Can you explain what that means to you and so that people understand what you're referring to when you say Zionism?
Well, Zionism was invented really by Christian anti Semites. Believe it or not, it's a British invention. Uh, and the early Zionists, the Jewish Zionists, like Herzl and all that, when you read their writings, their own writings, It's anti-Semitic. They wanted to create a new Jew. Well, guess what? That's what the Nazis want you to do. A new. That's what the communists want you to do. New man, strong, powerful, self-reliant, all that kind of crap.
Mm.
Pardon the French, but that's what that is. And the Zionists adopted the same thing. They wanted to get away from the Jewish shtetl, which is where East European Jews lived. They weren't allowed in the cities. And so Zionism and was adopted, was embraced as a way of getting away from the Jewish life, the way it had been all over Eastern Europe in small villages, and to bring them to someplace totally different. At first, they weren't quite sure where. They were even considering South Africa. I mean, but they grabbed onto the idea of the promised land. Now, Christians wanted to get the Jews back to be able to prepare for the second coming of Christ. And that is really the dynamic. It's totally insane. It's not pro-life, it's pro-death. And they invented, because there were about 100,000 Palestinians living in that land, they invented this, again, a meme, a land without a people and a people without a land, and therefore the people without a land are entitled to that land. The Bible is not a real estate deed. It's a story. Some of it may be true, some of it may not be true. A lot of people wrote it. It didn't happen all by, in one shot. No, there's no one author, and they contradict each other. The Bible is not, as I say, it's not a deed to expel those who lived there. And that's what happened in 1948. The Palestinians call it the Nakba, which is equivalent to Holocaust. And it was for them. And they've been really exited from their land, from their homes ever since. Those who are still, the next generation. As far as I can tell, my own opinion, I haven't seen this kind of thing written somewhere yet, but I think the strongest thing going for the Palestinians is they continue to have children, a lot of children.
Mm.
That says, that's where they put their hope. And every time when they're expelled, when there's some kind of a deal made, each time a cockamamie deal, nothing is really real, you see them marching back. They're not leaving no matter what. Israelis have been leaving by the droves. That's the difference. That's not something you're going to hear from AIPAC. That's not something you're going to hear from those who pretend. Those in Canada and the United States who are the Zionist protectors and spokespeople, how come they're not living there? The dirty little secret is that when Palestine, since the Balfour Declaration, 1950, 17, where the worst pogroms were happening in Eastern Europe, where did they go to? Not Palestine, no. They went to the United States, they went to South Africa, they went to South America, they went to Canada, they went everywhere they could. Only 1%, only 1% went to Palestine and then Israel. So I'm sorry, this is not the Jewish homeland. They do not represent me. I'm Jewish and a Holocaust survivor. And in either role, they do not represent me at all.
Thank you. I appreciate you um, clarifying that for us. I also want to talk to something that I think is really important that, again, people may not be aware of or have forgotten about. So prior to COVID, Netanyahu was losing support from both sides, the left and the right. And then COVID happened, and under emergency measures, it sort of helped him to remain in power. And then in 2023, we saw mass demonstrations. Hundreds and thousands of Israelis were, protesting weekly against the government. And then within months, October 7th happened. And I feel like after that, there was a shift. There was so much opposition against Netanyahu from Israelis, Jews everywhere. And now it seems like after October 7th, that's kind of shifted. And I'm trying to understand how that happened, like where that shift happened when there was so much opposition against him prior to that.
Well, isn't it convenient? Um, just like I recognized that COVID was a sham, I also recognized October 7th because I listened very carefully to eyewitnesses, Israeli eyewitnesses. Now, I happened to have lived for 6 months in Be'eri, the kibbutz that was hit the worst, right? I know the area. And I listened to Israeli eyewitnesses as to what happened. October 8th, October 9th. Um, some of those people have never really been heard of again because they were saying very clearly, very loudly. Number one, a woman who had been, when she was in the military, she was on that unit where for some reason it's always all women who monitor the border. They have a lot of different, I mean, they've got them, whatever surveillance equipment there exists, they have it and they use it. And she said, and she was adamant about it could never, ever, ever happen that anyone could get through that border. She even said, at night, if a leaf on a tree moved, we checked if it was a bird or something was there. She said, it's impossible. It had to have been invited. From Be'eri, some of the eyewitnesses said, yes, they came in with machine guns on motorcycles. Yes, they shot into rooms, but they didn't have air, and buildings were shot down. That had to be Israeli Air Force. They don't have an Air Force. I cannot not attend to eyewitnesses right on the ground. That's who I make up my mind from. And the fact that Netanyahu didn't allow until now, there has no investigation of how did it happen. There's a reason for that, but he needed something like that in order to start the war. So people have allegiances and stuff like that. I don't. Mine is to the truth. I don't. Wherever the truth leads me, I will go. I will not accept all these subterfuges. No.
So I know we're going a little bit over here. I just I want to just ask a couple of things before I let you go, Vera. Like, what goes through your mind when you see children living through war today, in this day and age, after everything that you've experienced, and what goes through your mind when you see this? Like, how can this be happening still?
By people having accepted this notion that they have to defer to authority, that there's such a thing as the greater good, the community good. I have been inveighing against this for decades. There's no such thing as the greater good. The greater good is when individuals of side by side live in peace together. That's called the greater good. And there's no such thing as the body politic having the primary uh, allegiance and all that. No, humans are built on families. That's how it starts. Yes, and your family comes first. That's nothing to be ashamed of, not the army, not the group, not the political party. And it goes on, the community, on and on. And that together, when you start looking at it, that's the greater good. Then that spreads. But you have to start with, this nuclear family used to call it, right? I don't know why they call it the nuclear family. It's not really a good term at all.
No.
It has a really bad feel. But the point is, yes, a mommy, a daddy, and children. That's how the humans are meant to live. And so the allegiance is first to that. And if they're okay, then you can embrace beyond and beyond and beyond. But if you neglect and you tell the kids, oh, just listen to the teacher, listen to what you're taught, I'm sorry, you're you're a parent who neglects a child. So children got very, very wrong messages. And look, I mean, everything that has been promulgated, everything that has been taught by government, including the food pyramid, it was all wrong. It was
Yeah.
all wrong.
Oh,
Everything. I tell people now, really, when they ask, what should I do? I said, just listen to what the government tells you to do and do the opposite, and you're going to be fine. And I repeat that. I tell it everywhere. And people laugh and they say, you're right. That's right. I said, don't listen. Do the opposite because that means they've got an agenda. Just,
absolutely.
just learn to say no. Just learn to say no. It's funny, but Nancy Reagan at the time said when it had to do with the opium and the drugging, and she said, just say no. That's it. All you have to do. You are your own agent. You're your own boss. You should be. You should be your own caregiver while you can, while your brain is working and your body is in your control. Hey, use it. As they say, use it or lose it, right? And people have lost their self authority.
You couldn't be more right. I mean, think of just everything in history. If the soldiers had said, no, we're not participating. If the media had said, no, we're not participating. During COVID, again, if the media had said, we're not participating. If we as individuals said, no, we're not participating. We're not giving you our kids. None of this would have happened. None of it would be possible. So it's so simple. It's actually just saying, no, no, I will not comply
No,
to your rules and
no,
authority.
I'll make up my own mind. That's what we really need to say. No, I won't listen now. I'll make up my mind. And then
Mhm.
you should always trust yourself. You should always trust yourself. You've got a mind, you've got a conscience, and you've got experience. Your life experience is very important. And they make it as if experts. What the heck, experts?
What
They
is the one thing that you think has to happen for humanity to finally wake up, to come together in unity? What is the one thing that we need to
well,
do?
it won't be in unity. Okay. That's a false kind of premise right away because unity means dictatorship. Think about it. People have a right to disagree with each other on different points. And unless you give that freedom to everyone to disagree, sometimes they'll come toward you, sometimes you'll come toward them. We are not, none of us are, or God, infallible. We're not infallible. And I always say, I could be wrong, but this is how I see it. You can interpret things differently, but but let's talk about reality and not about no matter what, right or wrong, my country, yeah, right or wrong, my whatever, religionist. No, that's wrong because that way you're not judging, you're not thinking, and you're not being truthful. And of course, then you're going to swallow a lot of lies because they suit the narrative that you kind of chose, but it's false. And that's what I'm trying to say. I swallowed it for a long time too. I thought, Israel, the whole story of the birth of Israel, but until I started reading the actual documents. I'm sorry. It was a fiction. Just as, slavery in the United States was very real. It was extraordinarily cruel. It was set up by the British, but there it was. And that too gets swept up to the carpet. No, you cannot, repeat that. And that's what this is about. There is, and ethnic, in other words, all that comes into play. I'm sorry, I see all the details here that fall into similar, superior, inferior, all that. Sorry, I won't tolerate it near me. I won't justify it. There's no way to justify that. I know where it leads to ultimately. That kind of hate that is shown toward the Palestinians, I'm sorry, that's frightening because that hate can be somebody else too. It's very easy to shift it to another population. No, people who are bred on hating like that, they're dangerous.
I couldn't agree more. We have to recognize that every human being is equal and every human life deserves dignity. And
They're entitled to be treated as human beings. And there is one rabbi that I especially do always kind of when I hear he said something, I want to hear what. And he's the one who said when somebody facetiously told him, "Do you explain the Torah to me while I'm standing on one foot?" So, like, pretty quick, make it fast. And he said, very simple, do unto others what you will have others do unto you. So I'm in good company, actually. Einstein was offered to be the first president of Israel, and he declined because of the way they treated the Arabs.
that is the most universal foundation in every religion is to love your neighbor as thyself. And we've gotten so far from that. Oh, well, Vera, I want to thank you so much for your time, for speaking with me today. I hope that this can open, some hearts and some minds. And I just respect you so much as an individual and the work that you're doing and using your voice. And it's not easy, as we know, but somebody needs to do it. And I thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you very much. Speak to you.
Thank you.
Bye.